and it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. I hope I'm audible and you can hear me loud and clear.
Yeah, you're very clear.
Thank you. Syed Saab has always been very kind. I am just like all of you, a business owner, an entrepreneur, a father. One wears so many different hats during one's life. But I think today we are here to speak about scaling business ideas and approaches and strategies. So it can be exciting, this journey, and it can be hard. So before I begin, I'd like to give a quote from Elif Shafak. Elif Shafak, those of you who haven't heard of her, is a famous author who's written the book 10 minutes, 38 seconds in the strange world and Island of Missing Trees. I recommend you for those of you who haven't read about her. So she had said, whatever happens in your life, no matter how troubling things might seem, do not enter the neighborhood of despair. Even when all doors remain closed, God will open up a new path only for you. Be thankful. It's easy to be thankful when all is well. A Sufi is thankful not only for what he has been given, but also for all that has been denied. So I think these were very profound words which I wanted to start this session with, because as a startup founder, as an entrepreneur, you start with a lot of energy and a lot of ambition, and somewhere down the lane you kind of get frustrated, maybe by some of the rules which are holding you back, by maybe some of the laws, or by some of the experiences that you gain along the way. Maybe the customer or the employee experiences may not be the best. So I thought this is important to start this session, that one has to remain positive and remain thankful. And with that, let's move ahead. So I think the first point that I'm going to make is about scaling up, right? Because that's what this session is. And what is scaling up, right? And a lot of times we confuse scaling up with growth. Growth and scaling up are two very different things, right? And I'll demonstrate this with some examples, right? Scaling means a top line growth without commensurate cost increase in manpower and resources. So I'll give this an example, that suppose you today have a business which has a top line of 100 rupees, right? And you're making 10 rupees out of that business, right? Tomorrow you are expanding, you are growing, and that business becomes 1,000 rupees, right? But you may still be making only that same 100 rupees, right? Because it's a 10% margin business. You've retained the 10% margin business from a 100 rupee business is when you started. Today, you're a 1,000 rupee business. From 10 rupees that you were taking home earlier, now you're making 100 rupees. That is simply growth, right? That the cost structure remains the same. The top line is growing and therefore you're making more money. Whereas what is scaling up? Scaling up is that in that same example, you had 100 rupees top line, you were making 10 rupees. Today, after 5 years of your journey or whatever, you are making 1,000 rupees, but the bottom line in terms of the net profit, you're making 200 or 250, right? And that is what scaling up means, that you are not adding the same cost, right? Your margin is also growing and your top line is also growing. And that is how you achieve scale, right? By bringing in some additional efficiency in your business. You're not doing things the same old way, right? So Syed Saab talked about my background of accounting. So I'll give you an example from the accounting world. From the accounting world, suppose I get a new client, right? I get a big new client, say a Tata assignment to do an audit. And I have to hire, say, 10 more accountants, 10 more chartered accountants to handle that work. I'm just growing. I'm not actually scaling up, right? Scaling up would be that, okay, I put together a new software, and using that software, I can now file tax returns more efficiently. And whether now there are 10 tax returns that I'm filing, or whether there are 100 tax returns that I'm filing, I can still do it more efficiently using a very set number of people, right? Using, say, a BCom graduate, I can file 100 returns by only adding, say, 7 more BCom graduates. So I'm able to get more revenue, and I'm also able to not add as many people, not add as much of costs. So I'm doing things more efficiently, and hence I am scaling up, right? So what that example tells us is that each of us need to use technology, use efficiencies and innovation to disrupt and scale up, right? It's not only growing, it's also scaling up. We need to change the way we've been doing stuff, and therefore we will bring in something new and scale our businesses, right? A very easy example is converting a service business into a product business, right? Let's say I take the example of, say, a travel agency, right? Or I take the example of an accounting firm. We are selling services. Now, how do you productize that service is where the innovation comes in. Can you make set products out of that? That, okay, this is, like I gave the example earlier, I'm selling a tax return as a service, right? It's now become a product, right? Or I'm selling a travel agency, like you all must have used Make My Trip or other. That's a set product, right? You don't have to negotiate कि नहीं, अच्छा इतना और पैसे ले लो, इतना कम पैसे ले लो. You know, the level of service, the rate, everything is productized, it's standardized, right? So that's how you can productize your service and bring in an innovation, make things simple, as in break down the process into simple, repeatable, actionable items. And that's how you bring in efficiency into each of those small steps. And that's how you scale. So with that context, I'm going to go a step further into the different approaches, right? So some things that you may have heard about is bootstrapping versus blitz scaling. Now, what is bootstrapping versus blitz scaling, right? Now, I'll give you an example of bootstrapping, right? You may have heard a lot of startups and a lot of founders who are bootstrapping today, right? What does that mean? That doesn't only mean that they're using their own money and they haven't got third-party investor funds. It also means that the growth or the scaling up is slow, right? So you are growing as well as you are scaling in a slow manner, and bringing in efficiencies or bringing in innovation to be able to scale is anyways a given, right? But you're not doing it as fast because you don't have that kind of funds. Now, what is blitz scaling at the other end of the spectrum is where you've got a lot of funds, you're throwing that in the market, and you're moving really, really fast, and you're actually breaking down barriers. You're breaking down things, right? Like, say, a Facebook founder, right? He changed our habit, right? Nobody earlier was looking at their phones and talking to their friends by messaging them or liking their photographs, or it's a disruption he caused by just the speed with which he moved into the market, and by getting so many new subscribers and users onto that platform, right? That was a blitz scaling that he did. So this is also a different approach, right? So you either blitz scale, depending on if you've got the investors, you've got that kind of team and other processes laid out that you can really move that fast, or then you bootstrap and bide your time, understand the market, and try and set your processes to that level that you can actually blitz scale at a later stage, right? So these are different approaches to scaling businesses, right? Now, I've put down a couple of steps, right? How one can scale a business. So I'm going to start with the first step. The first step in that process is evaluating and planning your business. Now, what do you mean by evaluation and planning? And some would say that Indians are very bad at planning. The Japanese are at the other end of the spectrum, the best at planning, right? Indians love to just jump in head first, and thereafter the jugaad comes in, and that's how things have got, done hitherto. And maybe that's to do with the environment that we've been brought up with. There has been an overload of legislations and laws, right? So to be able to plan carefully around all those laws is such a Herculean task. People said, screw that, let me just do the work first. But anyhow, that's not to undervalue the importance of planning and evaluation, right? So what evaluation and planning to a founder or a business owner means is knowing your purpose. What does your business want to achieve, right? What do you want to achieve through that business? You must know your purpose, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to write out a very fancy vision statement, right? A lot of people get confused, with these fancy vision statements and vision documents that you want to make, and get trapped into that. But it's just knowing your purpose in your gut. What do you want to do, right? Choosing a right strategy. For choosing a right strategy, again, I'll recommend a book called That Will Never Work. That Will Never Work is about the Netflix story. It's written by the first CEO and co-founder, Mark Randolph. And he started his company as a mail order CD business. Mail order CD means वो post से एक DVD या CD भेजता था, and by sending that DVD or CD, you could see the movie and then send that back. He would send a blank kind of an envelope with that CD. You put it back in that blank envelope, and it gets shipped back to head office, right? That's how he started Netflix, right? As a mail order business. CD, I will send you, you send me that CD back, right? It sounds strange today, and look where it's morphed into a multi-billion-dollar streaming business, right? Because at that time, there was no internet, there was no, nobody could even fathom it, right? So we are talking about an era where you were still stuck into snail mail, right? People were still sending physical mails, not emails, right? But that is the journey of how an early stage business, right? This book tells you about the early stage of the business and how they went through that early 0 to 10 stage, right? Which may be very valuable to each of the founders who are sitting in the room today. That how do you cross that early? You see, in a business, you've got two stages: the 0 to 10 stage, and then the 10 to 100 stage. The 0 to 10 stage is as difficult as the 10 to 100 stage, right? And this is all, this is US, typically where they talk about a 0 to $10 million business, and then a $10 million to $100 million business, right? That the type of founder and the type of team and the type of CEO that you need to scale up from a 0 to $10 million business is very different from the type of CEO and the type of processes and business approaches that you should have to grow from a $10 million to $100 million business. But right now we are all talking about early stage, and therefore I thought this book would be very helpful to each of you, that has a lot of good wisdom on the kind of strategies that one can follow. Again, I'll come back to something that I said earlier. When you are planning, try and break down the process into repeatable systems and processes. Create repeatable systems and processes. That's how you will productize your service business. Like I gave you the example of Make My Trip. You are creating repeatable systems and processes, and that's how you're able to scale, right? That's how you're able to add more customers without the pain of sitting in the office till 12 in the night and trying to, service that one client who has given you a big business, but now you don't, getting big orders is always the aspiration, right? But once you get that big order, many organizations fail to satisfy the customer's requirements because you have not set out repeatable systems and processes. So that is an essential part of the planning and evaluation stage that you need to put in your businesses. Gain the experience before you begin, right? Do an internship in a larger business, join a startup, see how the systems and processes are there, then come out and do your own business. Say in my field, as an intern, I joined PwC, I joined the Big Four, learned how they did their work, and then I joined my dad's practice and I tried to introduce some of those things. So gain the experience before you begin. Research your competitors. That's super important, right? The market that you are looking to capture, the business or the purpose that you have set for yourself. See what other players are doing in that domain. So research the competitors very carefully. There are a lot of good data out there. You can, understand the competition. Find the right product market fit. Product market fit is something that most MBA schools will teach you about, but putting it into practice is something which is really hard. Finding the right product market fit, and again over there, it's about like you talk about beta testing, right? In your field, try and do some samples, try and get first-hand customer feedback on your product to try and see what the market is saying about your product before really trying to scale a product. Because once you've invested so much of money, whether it's your own hard-earned money or whether it's investors' money, and then you realize that, oh, there's a flaw in my product, this is not actually what the customer wants, the customer wanted ABC tweak on that then becomes quite a costly mistake. So try and do this product market fit study, try and do a market survey, try and get some customer feedbacks to try and gain that at the evaluation and planning stage, right? The next step on the journey is finding the money. And that is, at some point, a lot of people get stuck over there. And the simplest answer to find the money is positive cash flows. This is coming back to bootstrapping, because that is something that comes inherently, naturally to most founders, right? To bootstrap and to make positive cash flows and then reinvest those positive cash flows. That's the simplest way to find the money, at least in a very early stage business, right? Then after you have got that positive cash flow and you're a little more confident about your product market fit, you think outside investor money, right? Try and get outside investor money, attend networking events. A very interesting story about finding investors is something that you all may have seen. Those of you who follow Elon Musk on Twitter, he has recently obviously made a bid for Twitter, and that bid is now going sideways. And out of that, we have a very good lesson to learn, which is about signing NDAs. NDAs, for those of you who don't know, are non-disclosure agreements. So whenever you're negotiating with an investor or in talks with an investor, please don't forget to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And why I tell you about Elon Musk's experience with Twitter is he announced on Twitter that I'm going to buy them for $44 or $45 billion. He didn't sign an NDA. And today on Twitter itself, he has announced that, okay, till the CEO doesn't prove that they don't have less than 5% bots or non-human subscribers, I will not sign the deal, right? So he is actually making the deal, a negotiation, a public matter, right? He's putting it on a public forum, which is the first rule, that you cannot name and shame on a public, your private, fundraising or transaction, right? When you're dealing with an investor. And this strategy is something called fish and chip. So you first you hook a fish, right? So they hook Twitter by giving out a really big number of $45 billion. And then you start chipping away on the price. कि अच्छा ये ठीक नहीं है, इसमें मैं आपकी price down करूँगा. This feature is not there. So number of subscribers are not there, so I'm going to put down. So this is called a fish and chip strategy. And this fish and chip strategy, the moment you're doing on a public forum or in a public domain, you're basically going to scare away all the other investors or likely other investors who would have approached this business, because it's a public fish and chip that you're doing. So this was kind of a rookie mistake that Twitter did by not executing an NDA. And that is something of a learning for all of us in this room, that whenever you speak to a potential founder, speak to a potential investor, you must get a non-disclosure agreement signed up. The next strategy, the next step for scaling your business is securing sales, right? How do you create a buzz in the market to be able to get that sale, whether it's through an innovation, whether it's through a great marketing strategy or a consultant that you hired to really come up with a fantastic launch strategy or a marketing campaign. Focus on the customer experience, right? I think this is the first thing that when we used to, in the olden days, call up our travel agent on the phone, the customer experience was not the best. That's why we moved to booking tickets online, because you get a better customer experience, right? Because you get things done faster and to the point, right? So if you focus on the customer experience, some of the other things, practice CSR, right? Customers like to deal with organization or founders or businesses which are socially responsible, which are doing stuff for the community, which are doing stuff which is aligned to their values and their systems. So practice CSR. Focus on established revenue source. This is a very critical learning, right? Many times what happens is that you've got a certain customer, without focusing on that existing customer, you're fighting or trying to bag somebody in the bush, right? That old age, adage of one in the hand is worth two in the bush is absolutely spot on when it comes to securing sales. If you are satisfying your customers, your current customers and your current revenue source without at the cost of your current revenue source, you can't try and ignore that and focus on an alternative or a new revenue source, right? So keep your focus laser sharp on your established revenue source. Conquer a niche. So when I talk about conquering a niche, it talks about businesses today are somebody came up with the idea and came to me that, okay, we've got a Tinder for dogs. Right? The whole pet story has become really big post COVID. We've come up with an app or a platform which is Tinder for dogs. Now that is a hyper niche. I'm not telling you to go and find that kind of a niche, but you have to conquer a niche is the idea, because that's how you're going to be known in the market for that specific niche area, right? And that's how you're going to secure sales. Participate in trade shows, create a sales funnel again through a digital marketing campaign or a digital social media presence. Invest in technology. Invest in technology means the right communication platform, the right CRM, workflow automation softwares, the analytics that you need to monitor, which includes LTV. LTV is not loan to value for those of you. This is lifetime value of a customer and the customer acquisition cost. So the lifetime value versus the customer acquisition cost is an important metric that needs to be figured out and tracked, especially for all of those who are looking at e-commerce businesses rather than brick and mortar businesses. Conversion rates, product performance, automating the processes we had already talked about. So these are, even for brick and mortar businesses, I'll give you a personal experience. I went to Bangalore 2 weeks back and we met with a company which is into selling mattresses. Today, they are India's largest mattress selling company. And when I entered their fancy office in Bangalore, the corner office was of the CTO, like a big room. And it was for the CTO. I'm like, the company sells mattresses. Why do they need such a big CTO office, or why is that such an important role for them? And when I sat with the CFO in the conference room, he's like, we only sell online. We don't have any distributors. We don't have any brick and mortar retail presence. 100% of our business is sold online, right? So that is the importance of technology, that even a brick and mortar business like mattresses is now being entirely sold online, and they have disrupted the market, right? So one can't overestimate how technology is influencing our lives. finding the right staff in terms of building an A team in customer support, IT personnel, marketing and sales. And the last point which I'd like to talk about is know when to say no. As an entrepreneur, you get so many opportunities, you are faced with so many decisions, and you're at so many crossroads. You must know when to say no. And I found a very interesting statement around this, and it says the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. So the main, that's kind of a tongue twister, but for all of those young guys, I'm sure you've got it. It is, and this is dovetailed with governance. You know, we had a lot of issues with a lot of startups. You know, Sequoia had come out with a whole Twitter statement on governance and how important governance is in their startup ecosystem. So governance is a process of fact-driven decision making, right? Fact-driven decision making rather than decision making on the fly or getting influenced by, you know, vested interests. So creating a good governance structure or a governance system doesn't only mean adhering to the laws or adhering to, you know, okay, GST law ye bol raha hai, ya income tax law ye bol raha hai. It means the whole structure of governance that you have set up in your organization should be fact driven, right? You must keep the facts and then take a decision. Without a fact driven governance process, you're going to falter. Customer feedback, like we talked about earlier, to determine whether to retain a feature of the product or not. This is again something out of the whole Netflix experience. If you read that, they had spent a lot of money in trying to build up these features, which actually they ended up realizing the customer doesn't want. So why are we spending so much money and complicating our lives? So getting that and knowing when to say no to you know, some of the shortcuts that we are faced with in life in terms of, again, financial decisions and other things. So know when to say no is a very critical thing. So in summary, first you need to grow, then you need to scale, and lastly, then you will succeed. You know, whether it's expand to exporting, continue adapting and innovation. And another thing that I currently, as a parent, I'm reading a very interesting book, and I thought something out of that I should share. They talked about respect and collaboration in a workplace, how important it is to not only respect your co-founders and colleagues and your employees, your customers, but also how that respect leads to a mutual atmosphere of collaboration, right? And for this is a very amazing story. I'm not sure if a lot of you may have heard of this. It's a story of a palace with a beautifully laid out dining table, right? With beautiful choices of foods over there. And everybody sat down and they found that there are these really long spoons on the table, right? The spoons are so long, they reach, you know, at the other end of the table. And to pick up the food, you're bumping into your neighbor's table and you're scratching them and stuff like that. So there was one set of people who came into this place, and because of that whole thing, they fought with each other, they bruised and injured and battered in each other, but they were not able to feed and satisfy their hunger because the spoon was too long. And another bunch of people came in the same table, and they said, okay, what if I feed the guy who's opposite me and the guy who's opposite me feeds me using those long spoons, right? There's complete harmony. You're respecting what the other guy needs, and everybody walks out with their bellies full, right? This is a lesson in respect and collaboration. It's the same circumstance. You can make it either heaven or you can make it hell, right? If you're going to be jostling and fighting, it's going to become hell for you. If you try and respect and collaborate with the ecosystem around you, it's going to become heaven. So this I thought was a very a great lesson in respect and collaboration, especially for founders of early stage businesses. And I like to end by quoting Phil Knight. Phil Knight is the author of an amazing book called Shoe Dog, which I recommend to all of you. and is also the co-founder of Nike. And Phil Knight said, play by the rules, but be ferocious. You can be as ferocious as you want, but just play by the rules, because if you don't play by the rules, God knows in India, things are now catching up with e-governance and electronic oversight, which is becoming so all pervasive. Playing by the rules, adhering to not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law has become really important. So with those words, I wish you all the success in your entrepreneurial journey. And I would like to thank once again Syed Saab and the entire foundation for giving me this opportunity to interact and speak with you guys.